My dad kicked me out over my stepmom's lies. Now he wants my help with their divorce. So, I'm 29 now, living in a cute little apartment I absolutely adore, but this story starts way back when I was a kid. My parents split up when I was 7. Honestly, I don't even remember them being happy together. So it wasn't a huge shock for me. My mom's this super independent, no BS kind of woman. And my dad, well, he's always been a bit of a pushover. Nice guy, but let's just say he doesn't exactly have a spine when it comes to standing up to people. Fast forward to when I was 17. My dad started dating this woman, Becca. At first, I tried to be cool about it. Like, hey, my dad deserves to move on too, right? But Becca? Oh man, she's the type who's all smiles and sweetheart to your face, but there's this constant undercurrent of, like, passive-aggressive judgment. And she came with a daughter, Alexa, who was a year younger than me. Alexa was, let's just say, we didn't exactly braid each other's hair at sleepovers. She had this way of making me feel like I didn't belong in my own dad's house. I don't know, maybe I'm being petty, but the vibe was off from the start. Becca would make little comments like, your dad works so hard. You should really pitch in more around the house, even though I was pitching in. Alexa, meanwhile, acted like she was the queen of the castle. If I left a dish in the sink, it was the end of the world, but her leaving her laundry all over the couch was totally fine. Classic double standards. And my dad? He'd just shrug it off, saying, they're just trying to get to know you better. Sure, Dad. That's exactly what this feels like. Anyway, after high school, I went off to college and kept my distance. I'd visit on holidays to keep the peace, but it always felt strained. Becca and Alexa didn't change, and my dad was still caught in his little bubble of denial. By the time I graduated, I was ready to move out on my own, but, money doesn't grow on trees. So, I figured I'd stay at my dad's place for a few months, save up, and then find my own apartment. Big mistake. Huge. It started off okay-ish. I kept my head down, stayed out of Becca and Alexa's way, and worked my butt off at my new job. But there was this tension in the air, like they were just waiting for me to mess up. And then one day, everything blew up in my face. So, here's what went down. A couple months into living at my dad's, I came home from work one night, totally exhausted. Like, I just want to microwave some leftovers and collapse on the couch, exhausted. But the second I walked through the door, I could tell something was off. Becca was sitting at the kitchen table, looking all dramatic, and Alexa was fake crying into her hands. My dad? Standing there like a deer in headlights. As soon as Becca saw me, she launched into this whole speech about how something very serious has come to light. I was like, okay, because I literally had no idea what she was talking about. Then Alexa chimes in, all teary-eyed, saying, I can't believe you do this to me. Do what to her? I hadn't even spoken to Alexa in days. That's when Becca drops the bomb. Apparently, Alexa's college fund, like her tuition savings, was missing a bunch of money. And guess who they were accusing of stealing it? Yep, me. At first, I laughed because it was so absurd. I was like, wait, you think I took her college money? Are you serious right now? But they weren't joking. Becca starts waving around some evidence, which turns out to be a bunch of bank statements showing transfers from the fund to some random account. And guess whose name was on that account? Mine. Or what will look like mine. I tried to explain that it wasn't me, that someone must have forged my name or something. I even offered to call the bank right then and there to sort it out. But Becca wasn't having it. She went full courtroom drama, saying things like, how could you do this to your own family? And your father trusted you. Meanwhile, Alexa's sitting there, acting all betrayed, like she hadn't spent the last 10 years treating me like garbage. Here's the kicker. My dad believed them. No hesitation, no benefit of the doubt. He just looked at me with this disappointed face and said, I never thought you'd stoop this low. That one stung. Like, I can't even explain how much it hurt to hear that from him. I kept trying to defend myself, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Becca kept piling on, saying she'd already called the bank and that the account was undeniably mine. Spoiler alert, it wasn't, but we'll get to that later. My dad eventually said something like, I can't have someone under my roof who would do this, and that was it. He told me to pack my stuff and leave. So yeah, I got kicked out of my dad's house over something I didn't even do. I spent that night in my car, ugly crying in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do next. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a pounding headache from crying all night. Honestly, I was still in shock. Like, how did my life spin out of control so fast? One day I'm just minding my business, saving up to move out, and the next I'm homeless because my dad decided to side with his wife and her bratty daughter over me. Cool, cool, cool. Totally normal. Anyway, I wasn't about to sit there feeling sorry for myself. Okay, maybe I was for a few hours, but then I realized I needed to get my life together. I called up my best friend, Jess, who's basically been my ride or die since middle school. She answered on the first ring, and as soon as I told her what happened, she was like, "Oh my God, get your ass over here right now." Jess let me crash on her couch for a couple of weeks while I figured out my next move. I'll never stop being grateful for her. She didn't even hesitate or ask for details, just opened her door and stocked her fridge with my favorite snacks, like some kind of angel in yoga pants. If you got a Jess in your life, hold on to them for dear life. In the meantime, I started hustling. I picked up extra shifts at work, ate nothing but ramen and PB&J for months, and saved every penny I could. Eventually, I scraped together enough for a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, just one room with an ancient stove that smelled weird and a bathroom so small I could touch both walls at the same time, but it was mine. No Becca. No Alexa. No judgmental looks from my dad. Just me and my freedom. At first, I thought I'd feel lonely, but honestly, it was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. I threw myself into work, made new friends, and started to build a life I could actually be proud of. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. No one could take that away from me. As for my dad, I went completely no contact. He didn't call, text, or email, not even once. And honestly, that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I kept telling myself I didn't care, that I was better off without him, but deep down, it felt like this giant hole in my chest. He was supposed to have my back. He was supposed to believe me. Instead, he just let me go. Over the years, I got pretty good at avoiding anything to do with him. Family gatherings? Nope. Holidays? Hard pass. My mom was supportive at first, though. She'd call me up and say things like, "You're doing so well on your own," or "I'm proud of how strong you've been." It helped, even if I didn't always feel strong. But then about 8 years later, yeah, 8 years, guess who shows up at my apartment door out of the blue? My dad. So, it's a random Saturday morning, and I'm just chilling in my apartment, still in my pajamas, sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone. Honestly, it was shaping up to be a pretty good day, until there's this loud knock at my door. Not a normal knock, either. Like, urgent. My first thought was, ugh, did one of my neighbors lock themselves out again? So I shuffle over, open the door, and boom. There he is. My dad. Standing there like he's just casually dropping by, as if we hadn't gone 8 years without speaking. I didn't even know what to say. I just kind of stared at him, coffee mug in hand, while my brain short-circuited. He looked older. Like, not just older, but tired. Worn down. His hair was grayer. And he had this weird vulnerability about him that I had never seen before. But even so, all I could think was, what the hell are you doing here? Before I could slam the door in his face, because, trust me, that was my first instinct, he holds up his hands like he's surrendering. "Please, just hear me out," he says. His voice cracked a little, which threw me off because my dad has always been this calm, steady guy. Even when he was wrong, he never showed emotion like that. Against my better judgment, I let him in, mostly because I didn't want my neighbors overhearing whatever this was about. I sat down on the couch, and he stood there awkwardly for a second before finally sitting across from me. I didn't offer him coffee. I didn't even say hi. I just crossed my arms and waited for him to explain himself. And oh boy, did he. Apparently, Becca and Alexa weren't the perfect little angels he thought they were. Shocker, right? Turns out Becca had been embezzling money from him for years. Like, thousands and thousands of dollars. She'd been funneling it into secret accounts, and Alexa was in on it too. They'd even used some of that money to fake the evidence against me all those years ago. Yep, the whole thing was a setup. My dad looked me right in the eye and said, "I was wrong. I didn't believe you when I should have, and I'm so sorry." He went on about how he'd only recently found out the truth because of their divorce. Apparently, Becca got sloppy with her finances, and it all unraveled from there. Now he wanted my help, not just with the legal stuff, but to fix our relationship. I just sat there, I didn't even know how to process what he was telling me. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him to get the hell out of my life for good. But another part of me, this tiny, pathetic part, wanted to cry and hug him and say, finally. Instead, I just said, you believed them over me. You threw me out without even giving me a chance to prove myself. And now you want me to help you? He flinched, like physically flinched. Good. He deserved that. He started to say something, but I cut him off. I don't owe you anything, Dad. Nothing. You made your choice, and I've spent the last 8 years cleaning up the mess you left me in. I'm not about to drop everything just because you're finally realizing you were wrong. He looked devastated, which, yeah, I'm not going to lie, it felt a little satisfying. But it also made me feel even angrier. Like, where was all this guilt and regret when I needed him? Where was this apology when I was sleeping in my car? Crying my eyes out? After a long silence, he just nodded and said, I understand. I don't blame you. And then he left. After he left, I just sat there for what felt like an hour, staring at the door. My coffee went cold, and I didn't even notice. I thought I'd feel, I don't know, vindicated? Like, told you so. But instead, I just felt this weird mix of anger and sadness. Like, yeah, he finally admitted he was wrong, but what was I supposed to do with that? 8 years of silence. 8 years of feeling abandoned. And now I'm just supposed to forgive him because he said sorry? No thanks. I tried to distract myself the rest of the day, cleaned my apartment, went for a run, even baked cookies, which I never do. But I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. The way he looked at me, like he was genuinely sorry, but also like he expected something from me. Forgiveness? Closure? I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care. Or at least I kept telling myself I didn't. A week later, my mom called. Now, for context, she and I have always been close. She's the one who picked up the pieces after my dad kicked me out. She helped me with my first apartment deposit, sent me care packages when I was broke, even came over to help me build IKEA furniture when I was too stubborn to admit I needed help. So when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I figured it was just a normal chat. Spoiler, it wasn't. She started off with, Hey, sweetie, how's everything going? Totally normal. But then, after a bit of small talk, she dropped the bomb. So, your dad called me. I froze. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He told me he came to see you, she continued. And look, I know you're still upset with him. Rightfully so, but don't you think it's time to at least hear him out? He's trying, honey. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious right now? I snapped. You were the one who told me I was better off without him. You were the one who said he didn't deserve me after what he did. I know, she said, sighing. And at the time, I meant it. But people change. He's trying to make amends, and I just think maybe you'd feel better if you gave him a chance. Feel better? I practically yelled. Mom, he threw me out? He let them ruin my life and didn't even bother to check if I was telling the truth. And now, 8 years later, I'm supposed to just what? Pretend it didn't happen? She didn't say anything for a moment, which just made me angrier. Finally, she said, I'm not saying you have to forgive him, but holding on to all this anger isn't good for you. It's only going to hurt you in the long run. I couldn't believe it. My mom, the one person I thought understood, was now taking his side. You know what? I said, my voice shaking. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Sweetie. No. I cut her off. If you're going to defend him, I don't want to hear it. And then I hung up. I know, probably not the most mature move, but I was so furious I couldn't think straight. After everything I'd been through, the last thing I needed was my own mom telling me to get over it. That conversation changed things between us. She tried calling a few more times, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I couldn't deal with her being on his side. It felt like I was losing her, too, and I wasn't ready for that. Then, as if things couldn't get any messier, Becca showed up. Yep, Becca. At my apartment. I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked rough. Like life had not been kind to her. But honestly, I didn't care. The second I saw her, I was ready to slam the door in her face. Unfortunately, she was faster than me. Wait, she said, shoving her foot in the door. I just need 5 minutes. Please. Why the hell would I give you 5 seconds? I snapped. You're the reason all of this happened. I know, she said, looking genuinely desperate. I know I screwed up, okay? But you need to hear this. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. You've got 2 minutes. She took a deep breath and launched into this whole confession about how she and Alexa had orchestrated everything. Apparently, Alexa was mad because she felt like I was invading her space. And Becca went along with it because she wanted to protect her daughter. Protect her from what, exactly? Me existing? I wanted to scream, but then she said something that stopped me cold. Your dad and your mom, they've been talking. A lot. I think they're trying to get back together. I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. What are you talking about? I finally asked. She shrugged, looking almost smug. They've been talking for months. I overheard a few of their phone calls before I moved out. They're reconnecting. And just like that, the rage I'd been holding on to for years came flooding back. My parents, the same people who had completely shattered my life, were now considering getting back together? Like none of this ever happened? I slammed the door in her face. I couldn't deal with it. Not her, not my dad, not my mom. None of it. After I slammed the door on Becca, I just stood there, staring at it, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to break out of my chest. My brain was spinning. My parents? Talking again? After everything? After all the damage, all the betrayal, all the pain they caused, not just to me, but to each other? I couldn't wrap my head around it. It felt like the universe was playing some kind of sick joke on me. For the next few days, I avoided everyone. My dad, my mom, even Jess. I just needed space to think. Part of me wanted to scream at my mom for not telling me. Another part of me wanted to call my dad and demand answers. But mostly, I just felt done, like completely and utterly done with all of them. I started asking myself a lot of hard questions, like, why was I still holding on to all this anger? Was it because I actually wanted to fix things, or was it because I didn't know who I was without it? And if my parents did get back together, what did that mean for me? Would I have to see them at holidays? Pretend everything was fine? Play happy family for their sake? No, absolutely not. That was the moment I realized I didn't want any of it. Not their apologies, not their explanations, not their drama. I'd spent so much of my life trying to get them to see me, to choose me. And for what? It didn't change anything. It didn't bring me peace. All it did was drag me back into a storm I'd already fought my way out of. So, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them back in. Not my dad, not my mom, not anyone who thought I owed them forgiveness just because they finally decided to feel bad about what they did. I'd built a life for myself, a life I was proud of, and I wasn't about to let them tear it down again. A week later, my mom called again. I picked up this time, mostly because I wanted to get it over with. She sounded relieved, like she thought this was her chance to fix things. I know you're upset, she started, but I really think you should talk to your dad again. He's trying, sweetie. He really is. No, Mom, I said, cutting her off. I'm done. With him. With you. With all of it. She went quiet for a moment, and I could tell she was trying to figure out what to say. You don't mean that, she finally said, her voice soft. We're your family. I corrected her. You were my family. But family doesn't do what you all did to me. Family doesn't abandon you, or guilt you, or expect you to clean up their messes. I'm happy now, Mom. Happier than I've ever been. And I'm not going to let you or Dad or anyone else ruin that. She started crying, which made me feel like the world's worst person for about 5 seconds. But then I remembered all the times I'd cried because of them, all the nights I spent wishing things were different, and I knew I was doing the right thing. For me, at least. I hope you and Dad are happy, I said finally. I really do. But I'm not going to be part of this anymore. And then I hung up. It's been a few months since then, and honestly, I feel lighter. Like cutting them out was the last piece of the puzzle I needed to finally move on. I've been focusing on myself, my job, my friends, my little apartment, and it feels good, peaceful. Like my life is finally mine. I don't know if my parents ended up getting back together, and honestly, I don't care. I hope they find whatever it is they're looking for, but I've realized it's not my job to fix them. It never was. Sometimes I think about the little girl I used to be, the one who just wanted her parents to love her, to choose her. I think she'd be proud of me now, proud that I chose myself instead.